Thank you everyone for tuning into Market for Immaterial Value. We are here today with
Lars Zimmermann, who is an artist and an open source economist.
Hello.
And Till Wittwer, who is an artist as well.
Oh.
And Valentina Garga and Peter Young-Landry, as usual. And I wanted to start with you, Lars, asking you about your project, the open source circular economy. You're the mastermind, first of all, behind this project, or no?
No, I'm a part of a community who builds this project.
Okay, that's already a point. So about your collective project of the open source circular economy. And I wanted to ask you to describe it a little bit, and also tell us what was your motivation, or how did you people came together and came up with this idea of creating this platform. It's a platform, right?
Somehow, yeah. Okay, I will try to make it very quickly. The Open Source Circular Economy Day, in short the OCE Days, are a global event or hackathon exploring open source methodology to develop a circular economy. So open source, the open sharing of building plans and processes, and circular economy is the idea of an economy that works without waste, because everything is designed and maintained in a way that all outputs of all processes can become inputs for new processes. Mm-hmm. So it's about saving the environment, saving resources instead of losing this. And in this, with this global hackathon or event, we bring these two concepts together, or we ask for the combination of these two concepts. For the first time, if you now Google for open source and circular economy, there's a lot of stuff in the web, but if you would have Googled it or used any search engine 8 months before, then you would have found one web page I run for quite a while now without any mentionable success. But now we have a really huge global community. 33 cities joined this event, creating local events. 33 cities in 5 continents and 25 countries. So we were really everywhere, in Africa, in South America, in Bogota, in India, in China. Shenzhen, for example, made a really interesting event, and so on. Yeah, that's basically the OC Days, and the OC Days are also used open source methodology to develop themselves. So every part of the global organization, and also every part of our local organization, the Berlin event here, was almost completely transparently. So we created a README. We learned this lesson from the software movement, where a README file. When you have an open source software and you go to the repository, there's a file called README first. And this README basically explains how to install the software, and it also has some information about how the project is structured, so that you can read where you can become a part of it if you want to. Okay. And we had READMEs like that for the global event and for the Berlin event, and some other events did this as well. So, and it's really cool to use a forum for this, because it avoids a lot of emails, because you can really transparently who's working on what and what conversations are happening. And I think this helped to onboard not only this global community, but also in Berlin we had quite a big community helping organize the Berlin event, because this transparent organization makes it easier to join in. Yeah, and we, for the OC Days, we created this forum, or we used the Discourse forum. It's a very well-developed open source forum software, and we installed it and used it for the OC Days. And this forum will go on, so the platform will continue. So we will use it for the next event. And in this platform, we asked the local organizers to publish their challenges, so the stuff they were working on. And I guess more than 10 did, because the forum came online quite late. But more than 10 cities did this, and there you can read what people worked on in Barcelona or Chennai or Helsinki, and really people could start help each other out with information. For example, there's one example that in Chennai,
some opera singers.
Maybe this is the sign that I should stop. Okay.
No, but I have tons of questions now regarding this. Like, for example, how did you make this shift in scale? Like, the question of scale, I think, is very important because you mention all the time you're a global community, but I'm sure you just started in Berlin with a bunch of other people, and then you imagine it grow, and you created the tool to do that, right? Which is the README file. Or how did it work for you to have this bigger reach?
Okay. The OC Day started on November 7, and there was a Skype conversation between me, Alice Audrey Grindhammer, who is a garbologist based in Berlin, and a designer called Max, and another guy. His name is Timothy Gozlin, and he had at that time a job for Future of Waste, which is a French organization coming from Make Sense, and his job was to travel through Europe and connect young entrepreneurs, grassroots activists who deal with the future of waste. Mm-hmm. And he reached out to me and to Alice because of her project, and I met Alice a week before, and somehow we all ended up in the same call meeting for the first time. And in this call, I asked, hey, how about a global hackathon about open source circular economy? And all the three others said, yes, let's do this. And because Tim had a big European network due to his job already, some days later, Sharon Brownville and Erica Purvis from London joined in. And so we had already an international community that started to develop this thing. And then we set up a webpage, creating a document explaining our idea of open source circular economy, which I really recommend to read. I wrote it together with Sam Muirhead, but Sam Muirhead really did some magic to this document. So that's the reason I can recommend it, because I'm not the only author of it. And then we had a simple file, text explaining how to join us, and this was really easy because you could just say, hey, I want to do a local event, and then we created a subpage for you and gave you a space in the forums, and that's it. So it was really easy to onboard, and then all the rest was sharing the concept and find a lot of people that then reached out to us. Then we had a Skype interview or conversation with most of them to answer their question and see if they really have the right intentions, and then we ended up with 33 cities doing it actually.
And I think that proves that there was a lot of resonance from all over the world towards your idea. So it feels that people are really anxious about developing tools that that run on a different basis of economy, or develop a different imagination of what economy and economic relations should be looking like in the future, right?
I guess so.
So maybe Till could also introduce a little bit himself and his project right now, and then we try to open up the discussion a little bit.
Okay, so basically the project I would think fits in this round here maybe is a two-step project, and one is that one is actually quite old. We started it in university, and it had to do with the given teaching structure that we weren't happy with. We wanted to have a specific class that was reflecting upon economy of the arts beyond what already is a given economy of the arts. That is like beyond galleries and existing markets, basically. Also speaking about an economy for artworks that move maybe or for art that moves on the very fringes of what you can call art, or what you can label as art, if you want to see it in a quantified way. And so we started this initiative, we applied for a little bit of funding, and we received a grant to be able to host a seminar, which was basically an interview or a speaking format and platform. And the important thing about it was that it wasn't a usual seminar format in these very boring, sterile classrooms, but we tried to turn it into we built a setting basically for it. We built a theater setting. We created a narrative surrounding it, partly to understand economy better ourselves, or understand a general situation better ourselves, and to create an immersive situation for everyone. But on the other hand, also because we thought that art students wouldn't be very interested in economy generally, so we tried to motivate them by telling a great story about it. So it was this twofold way. And what then happened was that the seminar actually ran for a year, 2 semesters, and it was very successful, and we were invited after that to participate in a conference to elaborate on these ideas of creating alternative economies, dealing with economy and finance, especially in fine arts, and trying to gain a position of agency, actually, not just being a pawn in a game of a market as an artist, as the figure of an artist, but also gaining some agency and being able to create a market yourself, or create an economic relationship yourself.
Do you have an example of this?
Well, yeah. What the thing is that we tried to devise, which I think was a very charming but doomed to be unsuccessful proposal, was that we looked at the financial markets and we found this amazing tool, which is, of course, it's not a very elaborate tool, but for us, as everything was completely new, we had no idea. We got into it and we saw that there was shorting, and shorting is basically the opposite of investing. Or actually, it is an act of investing, but if you invest, you would generally think you trust in a company. If you invest money in a company, that means you trust that it grows in value. And you can do the opposite, and you can bet money against a company. So you invest in its failure, basically. And this is a very interesting tool. It's a very high-risk tool also. There are not many people who are using them. And we found what was interesting there is that you can actually, it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if you play it right, you can actually make companies fail by applying this tool. And the amazing thing about it is it's not criminalized, it's just considered to be bad style in the stock markets. And we found that what makes this happen, a large part of that is telling stories. And we thought we were really good in telling stories. So actually that's one of the tools that we learned. And so we devised a tool, or we made a proposal to bring down Sotheby's, which is the largest, or one of the largest retailer, or provides for a large chunk of a specific market in the arts. And we thought, if we bring down Sotheby's by shorting, we can create a vacuum and fill that by an alternative art market.
And what would that alternative art market
exactly
be?
What would that be?
I think what we're looking.
That is, I guess, that's what we're looking for now. Yeah, pretty much. Because we failed because we found out that there were 2 things we didn't have, and that was a lot of power and a lot of money, and you need either one, or better both, to actually make this happen. But in the proposal that we had, or in the lecture that we gave, we were considering it as somewhat of a sales pitch, to advertise this idea for someone else to pick up on it in an activist way. But on the same time, maybe that's also important to say, on the same time, this proposal of bringing down a market in order to create another one, or to being able to create an alternative, was not only an idealist approach, it was also a hedging strategy for us. So we thought of it as a hedge fund, because we would have had invested a lot of our personal money, as we don't have a lot of personal money, but of course it's quite relative what a lot is. We would have invested that on a shorting position against Sotheby's. And so if we would have succeeded, we would have become rich, and that would have helped us a lot. And if we would have failed, we would have just failed, and everything would have went on, because we're poor anyways. So the idea was also to create a tool to hedge our risk as practicing artists.
And where was the problem? Why didn't you get further of implementing this proposal?
I think there were just too many unsolved conflicts also, and the technicalities were really difficult to handle. Plus, it was, I think, from the outset, it was more than it was an actual tool set out to make practicable. It was a story we were telling about a possibility. So it was much more of a fiction from the outset than it was an actual activist tool.
Yeah. Okay, but I think what we're, Peter, I and you are very much interested is to create or start imagining what this alternative market about art, or put it more broadly, economy around art could look like. And I think we're lacking a little bit of, I mean, it's really hard to grasp. That's why I was thinking that maybe it's interesting for us to look at examples out of the art market, you know, in other fields of economy, like the one Lars is operating more from, and start understanding how a new imagination about production of goods, for example, in this case, works, and then perhaps that will create a space of freedom or some inspiration for us to start imagining how things could work for the arts and for artistic production. If we start also imagining that artistic production is also part of our everyday life, and maybe it doesn't have to be only this luxurious commodity, but something that everybody could be a part of, you know, like this kind of crowdfunding model that we had in mind.
Yeah. Also now I think to think about alternative models, the reason why they would work is purely financialization. It's making more from something, it's investing and getting something back from that. And this is, if we want to get out of that, we should maybe perhaps look at open circular economy as well, because what is the incentive for these people to start in their countries doing this? Because there is no financial gain there. There is some other kind of value creation which is big enough for them to actually participate in this. And how did you communicate it, or what is exactly this?
I think the motivations to join the OC Days was for almost every local organizer a different one. So I would have probably to tell 33 stories, and each of it would be a little bit different. So, for example, we had in Eindhoven, we were the OC Days took place at the Philips headquarters, because Philips is one of the companies who really try to push forward the concept of circular economy. And then they sat down there and really had
Philips, you mean
Philips,
the big company?
The big company Philips.
Wow.
And had, I guess, around 30 of their top engineers discussing for one day about open source and circular economy, which is really
With you?
With each other there, and they invited open source experts. They ended up having Peter Troxler over there, who's a Dutch guy who's pretty active in the open source world. And then they really try to explore. And this is we made, to mention on a side note, we made video interviews with 25 of the 33 cities, and you can watch them all online because they are recorded as well. And the one with Eindhoven I can really recommend.
So there is one from these people, from Philips.
Yeah,
wow.
And you can really see.
Totally watch that.
Yeah, and I asked her. Her name is Fitria. I asked her why Philips are interested in joining, and she said that they saw that one of the big drivers for the success of their company and for the success of their circular economy goal of the company is collaboration, and open source is of course a technique of collaboration. And so they really brainstormed about how big companies like Philips, for example, could adapt the open source model. And maybe one other story, the other ones from the big ones is we were really excited that we had Shenzhen as the local organizers. as an event, because Shenzhen is for so many reasons incredibly interesting. Because Shenzhen has this huge, crazy ecosystem of producing electronics. Almost all of the devices on this table maybe come from that city. And on the other hand, it also really has a lot of open source stuff going on, because open source always has been somehow part of this crazy ecosystem. They don't call it open source. They really don't use maybe this technique to the full extent, but this open sharing of stuff has always been a part. And David Lee, our local organizer in Shenzhen, told me that the Minister for Economy in China had a speech in March, and he said the word open source hardware in the speech. Imagine that. It's really, really good. So that's the second cool thing. And the other thing is that circular economy principles have already been a part of the Shenzhen ecosystem, because for decades, Europe, for example, shipped over their old electronic stuff, and they didn't just melt it down to win back the copper. They started to repair this and to refurbish this. I'm talking again too long, but the story's finished quite soon.
We're in a public space, but
so there's a repair shop almost in every street. And now David Lee, he runs the Shenzhen Open Innovation Lab. They are really interested in figuring out how they can create this crazy ecosystem into a circular ecosystem. So because China was also the first country in the world who really had a circular economy law, and all the stuff comes together in this town. And so their motivation to join it was really to investigate and research a new way to structure their economy so that it's more resource efficient and more sustainable. So these are big, let's say, economy drivers here in this space.
But you also had all other kind of people that have much smaller projects, right? And that's, I think it's interesting that you can have a reach to to all kinds of scales with this idea.
Yeah.
Because the open source circular economy, what it is for me, is really a tool, a semantics tool, like a concept that everybody can understand and can apply it to whatever scale is the project that they want to do.
But it uses in essence the same tactics as any financial model, as even the art market does. It is investment, right? You organize an event like this as an investment to research new ways of profiting from this research, and this is fine actually. It is okay to have as a motivation getting better, profiting.
Yeah, but profiting, I hope in a more ethical or more socially and environmentally responsible way.
Yeah, exactly.
I imagine.
That was an interesting point for me when I heard also you talking and your introduction speech. It was quite a really well delivered pitch, and it made me think of and I really appreciate that. And it made me think of. And then you mentioned, Philips is really interested in the technique, and I was thinking that it's really not about developing entirely new ways, but it's like picking up on the things that are there already.
Yeah.
Even though because I'm sure that Philips' primary objective still is maximizing capital, because it's a privately run company, and that's what their main objective is. And then the way they're doing that, they try to rework that. And on the other hand, it seems like you have an objective which is much less connected to financial gain. The way we are talking about it is actually we are talking about not financial gain, but financial security maybe, or security stability of some sort.
Yeah.
And but we're all talking in the same way of actually appropriating maybe methods and styles that are there already. And I guess, for example, if you deliver a really good pitch, you can convince investors to, shift money over to your side. And you're talking about, it's not bad to profit from something as soon as you're very conscious about the way it happens or something.
I think in this critical small art world niche that we belong, it's always for us the question of cooptation. It's like, and aren't you afraid that if you create something, then it will be co-opted by capitalism and turn... not just the authorship, that the idea and the concept that you're trying to communicate will be totally turned against to what it was meant to be. And I like in this approach, but maybe this is kind of stopping it from developing as well sometimes. To have all the time this fear of not putting it too much out there, because then maybe it will get out of our hands, and then it will become a monster, like like the atomic bomb. if it's in the wrong hands.
Yeah, but it can swing either way always, right? There is a huge risk embedded in it. Like, and if you think about green capitalism, you would say it's greenwashing of an idea that is basically wrong. But then, on the other hand, your idea of this open source economy seems to be applicable for also many, many more in small scale and much more interesting ways of like tweaking the existing. And so I think it's a perfect example where things can swing both ways.
Yeah, maybe I can. I'm not really sure if the open source circular economy idea really can help your question, but I want to explain a little bit why. One viewpoint why this is interesting, because it perfectly works, as you said, with the current capitalistic logic and system. And open source is not open source is a marketing term coined in 1998. First, there was free software, and free software is basically the same as open source software, but free software always emphasizes freedom. And then it said, hey, but this model really has some cool capitalistic advantages because the development model works much better. But there's all this freedom talking that's somehow disturbing, and that scares the big companies, so let's coin a new term. So, circular economy is also, you can also say it's quite capitalistic because it's about efficiency. It's about having the resources at the hand, saving energy, saving time, saving resources. So both these terms work perfectly somehow with the capitalistic paradigm, which I think is pretty interesting. But on the other hand, if we really had open source on a large scale, or if you really had a circular economy on a large scale, which would demand a lot more different communication methods, probably something else than capitalistic could emerge out of that. So it's somehow between both worlds, and that's what I like so much about it, that you really can sell it to a big company, but somehow there is an unknown space where maybe new and interesting things can emerge.
Because of course it has the advantage of things being developed where money is, with an open source license, which can be used by people who don't have the capacity to develop something like, for instance, facial recognition. I don't have to write that code because it's open source. I can take it. That's why many companies have it, because otherwise it would have just been the author of that code, had it on the website. That's it. It wouldn't have been on Facebook. It wouldn't have been on Google. Nowhere. So of course this is also just progress and more making more advancement. Yeah, not only on technological level, but it can also be on other.
Yeah, you see, for example, you can use open source as an aggressive strategy for growth. For example, somehow you can say, what's the most used operating system right now? It's Android, because it was open source for so long, and Google really made it open source, and then all the companies except Apple started using it. Now it's the most spread one. But what Google has done in the last 2 years, they step by step close it down. Now they have the power, and now they... But still, maybe this is a bad thing, but there's still this old versions and this operating system everywhere in the world. Many versions people can hack and build upon, so it still does something good.
There is still an active open source version?
Of course.
Outside of Google? Yeah.
If there are an active version, probably, but I'm not really sure.
I mean, you see, that's what I mean with cooptation. You put something open source and for free out there until it becomes big and it grows, and then somebody creates an enclosure from it, and it becomes owned by one
but the original code is still open.
Yeah.
Yeah, but still, I mean, we had a discussion, we mentioned it already sometimes with Joe, who was one of the developers of Couchsurfing, for example, and we were discussing, like how the very same idea of Couchsurfing, which is for free, became Airbnb, which is like a centralized profit company that makes profit from one entity and not, for everybody that participates or so. So I think it's interesting to think about this, at least. It's not about protecting your ideas, because if you not do it, somebody else will do. We're all living in the current moment. We all have similar ideas. So it's not about not materializing them, but still keeping a kind of critical conversation going on about this. So not to end up in a world that, we are in a world that everything is privatized, unfortunately. Anyway, but I don't know, this imagination of changing that back in another model at some point could be. And I think that's what's valuable about the idea of open source, that it creates a plausible imagination in people's heads that things can be run on a different basis, and still make profit, and still operate within capitalism. Is not that we're creating something totally revolutionary, but at least it creates a little bit of a space of mental freedom, first of all.
I'm wondering whether there's not in a specific form of artistic practice that we probably would associate ourselves with, which is one that has to navigate outside of traditional, let's call it the traditional artwork, that is gallery representations and so on. If there's not something like an open source circular economy already at work, which is less based on, of course, open source circular economy, as I understood it, is based on resources, right? And the waste products become new resources.
Yeah.
And I think that's very much so happening with thought, maybe, with thought processes and with discussion material and discourse and so on.
Yeah.
That there's very much of that economy already at work here. And also that we kind of start, to distinguish now, or we make these moral categories, like this is still capitalism, but, and we kind of make a moral distinction, and then everything that lands in the butt bin, like in the trash bin of our thoughts, maybe we can still use it up at some point, or somebody picks it up and uses it and feeds it back to us. And so I think these circles of an economy, at another point we spoke about it, and we call it an economy of friendship, maybe.
Yeah.
Just helping each other out and featuring each other, and also providing each other with ideas. Could maybe be regarded as one of those.
Yeah, this is one of the interesting things to say about economy. People always talk about we have a capitalistic system right now, which is not entirely true. We have a lot of different economics. If capitalism means market and money, we have a lot of different other economic systems running in parallel. For example, couchsurfing is really truly gift economy. What kind of economy do you have in your family, between your friends? That's most of the time not capitalistic. There are a lot of interesting forms of organizations that are internal differently structured than after capitalistic principles.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be non-profit neither. Like, for instance, Couchsurfing, they do make $6 million per year, while they have no money aspect at all in their organization.
Just from donations.
Just donations.
And then that's enough to run the company and pay it's not that people work for free for it.
But they do not make a profit from it. I think there's a difference between being sustainable and making a profit.
Yeah.
Or do they make a profit?
I think they make a small profit now. They have also changed their model. It used to be a non-profit, and now it's more of a company.
Okay.
So things have changed even for them, apparently. But
Which is not necessarily a bad thing.
No.
I completely. And I also think it's really futile thinking of you can live in a condition of no contradictions. For example, I think this is one of the things you have to abandon as this very situation that allows us to sit here and speak about it already is a situation of huge injustice, where we are taking a lot of advantage, without even without maybe consciously acting for it, but just by the given situation itself. So I think life without contradictions is a utopia, but it's not something real to deal with in a way.
Yeah, couldn't agree more with you. But I will try to go back to my initial idea of how I brought you all here together and how actually I had the idea to approach Lars, because it's not specifically the art market economy that we're talking exactly, and not my question, but my idea was that the open source circular economy is a great conceptual tool, which what it does is to put forwards different kinds of values, like caring for the environment and caring for people, more than just pure profit, right? That's how I understand it, and that's the freedom it creates. The underlying, you have this entrepreneurial ethos, that's okay, but this entrepreneurial ethos is based on different values, let's say. And I think that's super important, and I was thinking how we can create, if the artist nowadays is an entrepreneur, we are all also entrepreneurs in order to survive. We're selling our skills, or maybe it's not concrete object artworks, because we're not part of that market, but we're entrepreneurs of ourselves. So if we're all entrepreneurs, how can we create this different entrepreneurial ethos for the artist, also based in these kind of different values? And maybe that's already, it's a very philosophical, it's not about how to really make it happen, to design a system that makes it happen. It's more a kind of philosophical question that we can think about, and maybe it already exists, like Till was mentioning before, with all these kind of different economies that we're all operating in. But I think it's super important to realize this and to have concrete examples such as yours to compare ourselves and our practices with, and to see that that these things are possible. They are not utopian. They are there. They exist. People are using them, and so many people believe in this. And also, capitalism is a belief as well. It exists because we believe that money has a value. So it's really a game about semantics, construction of beliefs, and construction of how we perceive the world. That's how I understand economy in general. It's a form of social theory, I think.
Then is there some type of missionary work that needs to be done? Because there seems to be, I'm just thinking that there seems to be a lot of weight carried around if you say, and that was before the podcast when we introduced each other. I personally was hesitant of saying, I am an artist, as I think it comes with a lot of weight already, and with a lot of presumptions, and with a certain attitude a lot of times that I feel is extremely problematic, because it's one that already denies the existence or the possibility to accept empathy with a particular way of thinking in the first place. And so, in order to create the situation that you just described, maybe there needs to be some work done where it is more acceptable to think in these terms, to actually accept, or not necessarily embrace, but accept the condition that we might be all entrepreneurs by default.
But
you know,
not good ones, because we're all.
But not, exactly, but not very good ones. But we could become better entrepreneurs by accepting in the first place, or acknowledging that we are entrepreneurs. You know, I think it's also an easy way out of being an entrepreneur if you're a bad entrepreneur, because then you don't have to take responsibility for what you're doing, and you can complain a lot.
I use the silence. I have this thought for a while now, and I use this opportunity to share it.
Okay.
Because whenever I visit art schools, I didn't study art myself. I see one thing that really disturbs me somehow is that they somehow there is this. I have this feeling, at least in Germany, that somehow it's this the idea that you become an artist and then you sell your paintings or something like that, which is for almost all cases not true. And the truth is that those who would later lead on a happy life is that they have some kind of other skill. For example, I know people who are really good in building wooden, strange, beautiful wooden furniture or ovens or something like that. Or they are teachers. It's this other skill set that then makes them the money and then a happy life. But I have the feeling that in art school it's forbidden to talk about that. You are a loser when you say, maybe I will build ovens the rest of my life, really beautiful, strange ovens, and sometimes sell an artwork. And this is really a problem because it creates so many stress, I have the feeling, for the artists studying there, and really makes a lot of them happy in the 10 or 15 years after the university till they figure this out, that there's another way. And it should really be on the spot there. Even if you look back in history, almost all of the successful artists, they had a really money-making profession, and that should be somehow back, and that should be put on spot, I have the feeling, in art schools.
Yeah. I think also the discussion whether art should come not from financial gain. Like, if it would be your job, then you would make them to sell them. But if you have another job, you don't make them to sell them.
Yeah.
Maybe you do, but you have more of a freedom there. There's less of a focus on money.
You don't care so much if you sell
exactly.
it.
So the art is a little bit more free to not go for a client.
Yes, and not, because I mean we're also living in an ever demanding world that we spend so much time, for instance, just on replying emails nowadays. When we don't have the possibility of doing 2 or 3 jobs and being good in all these 3 at the same time. I mean jobs, I mean more like work, to develop a body of work where there is artistic or in another profession.
Exactly.
It takes time.
I don't say that it should be advertised in art schools, but it should be made not that no-go. I have the feeling it is, and should be often talk about this.
Yeah, I think.
And then you can decide against it. Okay, no, I want to be a really full-time artist. I don't want to learn to build ovens. But it should not be uncool to build ovens, for example.
No, exactly. I think also the discourse has to be able to enter the academy. I completely agree with you on that topic, as it seems to be a taboo. And I think it's actually quite a weirdly interpreted claim of the autonomy of the arts that is actually the barrier here. So this definitely needs to change.
But I think this is, it's not only in an art school, because I studied architecture and there it was the same. We all kind of imagined that someday we will become Zaha Hadid, you know. That's the way you understand the world when you're like 18 years old and you're studying architecture.
Which has good effects in teaching, of course, because this educates you if you think that you will become this big architect. So it's also important.
Yeah, but then when you get out in the real world and you understand how much percent of your time is the creative part, and how much is all the other kinds
exactly,
of skills of running a business, basically, that you need.
But
to
it's
share.
exactly the same, with Zaha Hadid, because that's the problem that people don't understand. That Zaha Hadid is a businesswoman.
Yeah.
You know, Oliver Lyson, all these people, they are business people. They're not, you know, what they consider to be the great artist or the architect or something like this. It's basically. Most of these things run like businesses. Yeah. They wouldn't necessarily have to be run like businesses, I would think, but also the narrative that let's stick with the artist for now. The artist is this lonely genius spitting out work in the dark studio, and so and then there comes the collector and you know discovers and so on. Like this, if you look at it in daylight. It's completely absurd. It's not hard to recognize. It's a completely absurd narrative. Yeah. But it's still around. It's still around, and it completely also doesn't acknowledge the fact that that successful artists that most people who follow this narrative want to be don't operate at all like that in any way.
Yeah, that's what we said before. That artist is an entrepreneur of himself. So the best entrepreneurs, the best businessmen.
Yeah. But I think what then I have problems with is that this entrepreneurship runs on their own values nowadays, because we really just celebrate the artists who are basically more economically successful, but maybe their work communicates really very wrong things, or the way they do their businesses. Like, I don't want to start naming people, but I'm sure you all have examples in mind about that. He has no idea.
Of course, there's stuff that I think there's artwork that works better with the market structure and others not. If you paint pictures and you are nice and the pictures are looking shiny, then it's easier to sell them when you do some weird sound installations, for example, how to sell this.
Exactly, and that's again the problem of the market, that somehow is constructed also by an elite of people. It's also like the financial elite of the banks, in a way, and then of course they promote what is for them a good investment and what has worked well during the past years and make stable profit. They're not going to experiment with new things, you know. And today I think it's ever more visible that there is so much art that is totally obsolete. It doesn't speak to any of us because it's so old school, or it's still stuck in the past somehow, but it's still celebrated in this market because it's and promoted because somehow it's what still makes money.
But in this way, okay, if you want to activate art, or if you want to activate what the work you produce in that sense, because what you're describing is probably work that is not activated or not activating itself, but it's very happily situated in the given situation. I think then the open source circular economy is you can also look at it like a hack in a way, because you can into the usual business operation, you can sneak in ideas and proposals that actually do change the standard way of doing things, and I think that's pretty much what you described before, and it has the potential of actually changing. It doesn't change the entire system, but it has the potential of changing small ways, and in this way you can completely read it as a hack, I think, of pushing a given economy into a specific direction. And I think that's exactly the same, or that's the thing. If we narrow it down to an economy in the arts, we can try devising a tool that actually is a hack or a parasite, setting on an existing economy, but then altering it or deterring money flows or whatever you want to change in it.
I think also now is a very good time for all these kind of structures. Just the success of, or the reason why a company like Philips would be interested in open source, it is of course because we live in a time of financial crisis where every financial structure is kind of in doubt Russia is buying gold. I mean, they're buying like loads of gold just because they want to have stability, and everybody's searching for a way. So it's a good time to pitch new ideas with the same motivation of financial gain. So
yes, Philip was looking at it because Philip invested a lot of money into circular economy. They are part of the Circular Economy 100, which is a group of big companies, and they really buy space in the Guardian and the New York Times to explain circular economy. It's their big advertisement thing. And when we make a global conference about open source circular economies, they somehow have to join in, and so they somehow brought this in that they had to discuss open source. And there's this other I don't know if it's really helpful for the major topic, but I will tell a story very quickly.
We're brainstorming.
That circular economy is was a term used by these big companies. You know, it's really these 100 companies, and now we connected it to this more grassroots Fab Lab environment, and somehow started a dialogue somehow, because all these people probably have to talk together if really circular economy is developed. Yeah, this was some kind of hack, if you want to call this a hack. It's more like an information trick.
Information trick.
How would you describe? Sorry, I'm taking the role of the interviewer now, but I have a question. How would you?
It's not an interview.
It's a brainstorm. How would you describe your role in this game, where there are, you know, where still it is quite evident that if you have a lot of influence and if you have a lot of capital, you can make things happen much quicker, right? For example, that you say they have big advertising campaigns. With a big advertising campaign, you can spread an idea really quickly, and you can even also convince people of doing something really quickly, right? And us four sitting here at this table probably do not have either. And so I'm curious about, how do you consider your role in this bigger picture of these big companies, you know, Circular 100, however they call it, Circular Economy 100. And then are you in a lot of contact with these huge companies, or is it like a rare case, or do they on a regular basis invite you to contribute to their think tanks, or
no? They don't do this right now. We found it I founded zusammen with three partners: Sam Muirhead, Alex Schur, and Jenio Tivoli Kepler, the OpenIT agency, which is an agency that aims to do consulting on open source, so explaining big companies and small startups how to use open source methodology. But we are not very good in acquiring new customers, so it's not very often that we do consulting jobs, maybe one time every 2 months or so, you know. But maybe as the question of open source and circular economy grows, we are there to answer the questions, and we are also there to learn, because it's not that everyone knows everything about everything, because it's open source circular economy is more like a question still. It's something to discuss and to figure out. And but there's one interesting thing, this is somewhat in reaction to you. We have with open source, some month ago I was at the Open Commons Congress, and I met Duncan. I don't know his last name, but he wrote a book about sharing, and he teach me something very interesting. How does politics work? You need ambiguity, so you need terms that are very open and mean for different people different things, but still all the parties are using the term, and they somehow talk to each other. There is a conversation. Yeah, this is really, really interesting. When you with that in mind, you can understand so much about politics. And this all the time happens when a new hype emerges. For example, share economy was in the beginning a really good thing. Now it's a really bad thing, because this word is filled with new stuff. Everyone can just put something into these words. And open source somehow is a word like this at the moment. I have the feeling, I really talk to several people. Yeah, this open source, it's exciting. I don't know really what it means, but I have the feeling it's a good thing, you know. And so this is really, it triggers fantasy and value expectations, blah blah blah, and brings people in. But the good thing about open source is we have a definition what it is, you know. In the end of the day, it's really clear what is open source and what is not open source. So we have both effects, and I'm not sure how this will play out for us, but it's an interesting situation we are in that I like.
Would you like to share with us this new idea you have about making the online shop to sell your art, or it's something that
No. It's also not. Maybe it has some small parts. I opened a shop, mostly because I have an open source hardware startup in mind. I want to do for quite a while now, but I never find the time to do this. And with this startup, of course, there would be a shop. And now I opened this shop. The shop is called Mi Factory, and there I sell artworks. I do, and one day hopefully this Baubus thing. And it's very rare that I do really physical stuff. But I built, for example, a Lego brick from Meccano in wintertime, and now you can buy this there as a regular art piece. And you also can buy donator spot, so it's like a crowdfunding campaign. People can just and I sell my as a little experiment right now. I sell my notebooks. I have these notebooks like yours here, where I just hand sometimes is another part of your brain, another way to think. And so that's the reason I have these notebooks. And then when they are full, I don't really have a use for them anymore. I just sell them there, you know.
That's amazing.
And I think it's just this comment of we are all artists who doesn't really produce physical things. So what to sell when markets are mostly about physical things? But of course, we leave all these traces somewhere. Let's collect them and give it to people.
Do you actually sold anything?
The shop opened. I guess the webpage went online last week, and I haven't advertised it.
So you still have a chance of getting
We
it.
will advertise it on our platform. Naturally.
Please do, and you can also have a look how I describe this. Maybe it's interesting because they all have dates, and then you can pick from a long line of dates. Just pick your dates, and of course some are full with interesting thoughts or interesting sometimes drawings. But I don't. But you know your dribble, and some are just full with to-do lists. So some are a little bit more interesting than others, but I don't display which book contains what. I say it's just a gamble. Take your pick, and you can have. So
that's a great technique.
Also makes people interested in your biography, so they can try to match, like, you know, reverse engineer at what time there was a culmination of good ideas.
Exactly. You can trace back most of my work I've done in the last year. You can also trace back online, but you can see immersed in some of these books is, hey, how about a global conference about, or you know, all these ideas, or how about open source and circular economy? Somewhere it is there, you know, and it also plays a little bit with this myth, you know. I guess last year the contract between the two Apple founders was sold to Sotheby's for 200,000 euros or something like that. I'm not really sure.
Or Apple?
When Steve Wozniak and I think I tell the story completely wrong, but some very early Apple contract documents were sold at Sotheby's. Not as art, just interesting, unique
historic document.
Artifact, exactly. Or think about the notebooks of big artists like Van Gogh, for example. They would be sold somehow. It's worth something, and also to do. Okay, you can buy mice. It's also my books. It's also some kind of statement of this. This obsession with items, blah blah blah, or whatever. Or what are the items of a person or an artist, or blah blah. So there's a little bit of a joke, or
it's a bit of a comment.
You'll sell your pencil
but
there.
If you start selling very well and you need more supply of notebooks, I have tons of them as well.
And but there's one very interesting thing, a research project for me as well. When I now know that my notebooks are not really private, I'm surveilled somehow. I know someday maybe someone buys it and will really read my private thoughts there. Will you then start to censor yourself? No, that's stupid. Or okay, maybe I don't dribble that ugly thing while I'm on the phone because maybe someday someone stole. Will this change? And right now I haven't noticed any change really, but I see that I start thinking at least about this.
Maybe once you start selling them.
Maybe. What happens in the moment where the first people really bought one? Will I then think, oh shit? You know, it's actually I've seen some change right now.
I mean, there is artists who do that sell somehow their notes, and I really love this artist called René Gabri and Irene Anastas. I think they're brilliant in many ways. They do a lot of work about the commons. So basically, their work is very discursive as well. So they don't really produce material things, but they're writing all the time, and they have developed a very nice technique of writing things, like in a very, very aestheticized. Like, it's really beautiful. And then they sell these documents through the gallery system, I guess.
Maybe this is a way to reflect about it. All the physical traces you leave, like you said, my old pencils or my old phone with all my contacts or something like that.
This plate that I just ate from.
This plate, yeah.
No, that becomes ridiculous, but
yeah.
There can be a moment that it becomes a bit ridiculous, but it can also be an honest thing as well.
I think it's ridiculous right now. Why are my notebooks? Why should they?
To me, actually, I think what to me is much more interesting than playing on the notions of the role or the figure or the character of the artist is actually how it ties in back to the circular economy thing, as you say. I mean, it's quite obvious, right? If you say, okay, after your notebooks are filled, you cannot use them anymore, really, and you never look at them again, but somebody else might find something really valuable, so you're kind of putting it back into circulation, and you kind of, it's recycling and occasionally maybe upcycling when somebody outshines your own ideas and builds something on it. And I think this is it's an incredibly interesting moment, and to me it's much more interesting than playing with the figure of the artist and like everything the artist touches becomes gold. So I think also a telephone with contacts in them, it has, on the one hand you can say, okay, I sell it as an artwork, but on the other hand it does have this value which would fit in much better into open source circular economy idea, and that's where it becomes extremely interesting.
For me, one of the interesting things, because with open source I experiment, of course, a lot. The new project I'm developing right now is really also about exploring open source techniques in other parts than the world of software. Because open source, many people think it's publishing the building plan, which it's in most cases it's not. It's making the process where you develop the building plan open so that others can join in. And of course, in the end, the full building plan is then online as well. So it's really about structuring working processes in a different way so that they are interesting to follow by and offer steps. And this is with these notebooks as well, somehow now the case. That when I look at myself, will I write this down or not? Will this be useful? It's really interesting how the new project I developed is called The Cities Open Source, and the website will be online before this podcast is online, and then you can have a look there, because I tried to explore there a new way how to communicate the question of a project so that other people then can join in. And all the working progress I do, all the documents I create, I somehow try to structure the way right now that I really write it directly into the WordPress. I don't use a document, or really I can write it directly into the WordPress. So this is another aspect of this, how you structure your work.
And will the Cities Open Source be also a kind of a participatory platform for people to build?
Yeah. It uses the platform of the OC days to some part.
Okay, cool. I'd like to get involved with your projects as well and be part of this community.
Yeah, it's play with it a little bit.
Okay.
That's interesting.
Great. So, shall we quit, because it's already quite a long time for the podcast?
I have one thing when we are in a discussion. I want to tell you a little story. I can't share it, but a friend of mine, she has a friend, and he wants to make a platform, and I think the platform is a horrible idea. The idea is it wants to respond to the question, when is art worth something or not? Who decides who makes art really or not? And he said, that's a difficult question, how to invest your money and know that it's really a good art or not.
A good investment.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's his question. And his answer is he wants to make a platform where artists, of course, can display their work, and then other artists
can evaluate them.
Evaluate your work, and that's you have to evaluate the work of other artists. We say it's good or bad or good, so that you can display your own work. That's his idea, and I think it's so Evil.
That's mental.
Doesn't work like that.
Do you think it's a good idea? Why is it evil? I can't even start to explain why this is so a bad idea.
Okay, I think the very first problem with it is that it says there is the artist, and every artist has expertise in what the other artists do. That's one of the biggest problems.
wrong, yeah.
There are so many more, but this is one thing.
Yeah, no, I mean, let's try to take it. Let's try to take it.
This is a word for many people, many things, many different things for many different people. You can't just grade it.
On the other hand, though, I completely agree. It is a terrible idea, but then I also feel the instant impulse of. Because I mean, what it is trying to do as well is quantifying, right? It's very much quantifying work, and I'm completely rejecting that as an impulse. And I'm asking myself if I'm not completely corrupted by an arts mythology, an arts narrative I was brought up with that says no, it must be quality, it must be about quality only, and so on. Like whether I should myself not take a step back, and think. What aspects of quantification actually can be helpful or not when you think about art, or when you deal with art, or when you produce it, as we hear. And I don't have an answer, but I've just noticed myself reacting to your to the story.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this aspect of quantifying art is already there when you put a price tag on an artwork, right? It's basically kind of the same thing. And I was having a conversation yesterday with Peter about that because I was reading this amazing document by Max Haven, who's an economist as well.
Also a podcast.
And we also had the podcast with him, and he was explaining why money is a bad measurement of value, because there is so many different layers of value that come into play, and they change all the time due to different factors, and it's really just impossible to grasp the absolute or total value of a thing, or of a skill, or of a service, or whatever, in a way that everybody is satisfied with that. So value is a subjective thing in general, like how I understand it. He was explaining it more from a Marxist perspective. But value is such a subjective thing that is really impossible to measure. And I think an artwork is really a good example of why is it impossible to measure value, because it shows that in some cases, an artwork costs millions, and in other cases an artwork costs very, very little. So this big gap, why is that so? It's still something inexplicable and totally irrational, and that's what's happening in everything that has a price. It's still a little bit of an irrational.
Yeah, but that's the natural part of the process. Putting a price tag on it is a statement about it. It's like I still like what Luhmann said. What is art is what people say is art. Everything else comes from there. And one lesson I really learned hard in the last years was really to understand that all these artists we know because they are famous. There's no really quality in art. It's the whole process of making it famous, making people look at it, discuss it, is part of the artwork. Yeah. It's part of most of the good artists we know, like boys, we are really good at this because they were good artists. That's part of the process as well. And sometimes, like when I say I 55 euros for one of my blue books, this is like a statement about. Putting a price, it's a remark about this.
How do you set the price for the books?
He doesn't think so much about it. I think that's the best way to do it.
Exactly. How did I set the price? And the answer is, I don't know.
It just came to me. I just had this epiphany.
Exactly. It's good that sells more because we raise the price.
Yeah, I had the sailing course recently, and I shared the boat with somebody, and she also paints, and she had a website, and she sold them for around €1,000 and less. And she sold very few, and then she put €3,000, and now she sells a lot.
Yeah,
Just
exactly.
Just by raising the price,
Yeah.
to make people believe that you're more valuable.
Exactly. There was this woman who made shamanism courses, and it was because she didn't want to take so much. €300, she never sold anything. Then someone said, "You sell it for 3,000," and now she goes crazy with it. That's how money works, especially in this
Yeah, but
field.
it's an economy of luxury or exclusivity, or something more weird than normal commodities. So those have to be more expensive in order to sell.
Also,
I
the
guess.
richer are getting rich, the poorer are getting poor. So also the price of art art is for the rich, so it has to be more than what it used to be. Because
Probably.
the audience is richer, so now for them it is cheaper art that they buy, so they don't buy it.
Yeah.
They want to buy it.
But you mentioned before this quote that art is what people decide that is art.
I'm sorry.
Was it a quote from somebody?
That's how does Luhmann? A million people try to make definitions for art. They all fail, but somehow for me, the one of Luhmann, Niklas Luhmann, the famous German Systemtheoretics, I don't know, what's the English word, he says in German, Art, Kunst ist, wo die Leute sagen, dass Kunst ist. Art is where people say it's art.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly, but I think the friend of your friend perhaps also heard this quote and tried to translate this into a model, a way of quantifying, of really making it real.
I think he has in mind this
But-
Russian market.
But I think that's where the problem is,
Yeah, exactly.
You cannot do this in this way.
Yeah, exactly.
It is true that art is what we say, what we decide is art. Just like money is what we decide that has this value.
And I think he really, my friend, she has this Russian rich people who wants to buy art, and they really buy randomly art. They just want to make sure it's a good investment, and it's a service for them to make artists. Yeah, of course, he has a mechanism.
So many art consultants that
On-
can tell
exactly.
you what
On the
is
other
the
hand, I
good
think
investment. It's a job.
It's extremely amazing that he grants artists the the knowledge and the expertise
Not
to create
curators,
this type of
other
value.
artists.
No, actually, maybe you have to be very, very thankful about this idea, because he's empowering us as artists.
No, it's
In a sense.
To become the taste makers of the art.
Yeah, because on the other hand, exactly as you say, there are these consultants who say invest in this because this will be, and these consultants, of course, they are the ones who create the markets. They are the ones who in the end create the expositions and so on. And
he
if
pays
he
the
tries to
people.
tie it back. So you could
Of course, he suggests a mechanism to create this immaterial value somewhere,
Yeah.
But it's an evil one because
and it will not work, of course. There's no question about it.
Yeah, or it's a really evil mechanisms in it. For example, I don't know the English word, maybe you can help me out. Neid und Missgunst.
Oh yeah, just being what is it? Greedy, like greed,
greedy, and
right?
then jealous, all this stuff. Imagine you see an artist and he's a little bit like you, and you really like his work, but you say, if I give him a plus, then he will outsell me. So for your own, oh no, it's bad, and you have to. Also, on the other hand, have you ever played with Tinder? This is a very
app
famous dating
to-
app
yeah.
right now, and
I
it's
don't
really.
know it, but
A friend of me gave me his phone, and you really have to look at a picture and decide if the person is hot or not. And if it's not, you have to use your thumb to push it to the left, thumb down to the locus of ugly people. And you have to make a decision every second. Ugly person, ugly person. You have to really upload all these negative emotions inside of you all the time. You really feel like shit after you use this. And now you have to look at all the ugly art that's there.
Yeah.
Ugly.
and it's
Do you
like
want
so
this?
easy for you to say that something is ugly without even, or somebody is ugly without even getting to meet this.
How will it be called, the platform? Art
So
Tinder.
superficial.
Art Tinder, why not? It's really
I
good.
think it will be a very successful business though, so maybe we should do it before he does and make
Do
some
you
money
think
with
a
it.
platform like this would be different if it weren't an online platform? Because in a way, also, it is something like this is already happening, right? It's coming back to the economy of friendship. You feature each other. You try to feature your friends. At least the way I experience it. I think that very different, many different ways maybe. But the way I experience is that people try to actually feature each other, and maybe not so strictly connected to which work or what the work of the specific person is. It's more like you're in a social relation, and that's when you try to feature each other and try to recommend each other to whomever you think might be interested or influential and so on. And but you don't do it the other way around. You know, you don't say this is a bad person. You just don't say anything. It's basically like the positive feedback thing, like, you know, the Facebook thing. You cannot not like something, you can only like things. And if something is not liked, it's bad, but there's no negative measurement for something.
Yeah, true.
And so I'm wondering whether the evil that comes into this mechanism might be that it's an online and thus impersonalized mechanism, and it's not so much based on actual and maybe even physical social relations that unfold in the space, but it has more of the quality of you know, the comment section below a YouTube video, where there's a lot of, you know, bullshit happening.
Yeah. Or of like getting the time to physically visit this artwork, wherever is it, because you might have a much different impression.
Exactly, that's a whole different story. That you're like looking at artwork on a screen might be not the best way to experience, let's say, a painting or something.
And
so I think
it only works for visual work as well.
Yeah.
You can't make.
What's worrying about this quantification is the element of superficiality that comes with it. You know, like how do you really judge or evaluate something if you don't take enough time for?
Yeah.
A friend of mine that was jury in a competition was telling me recently that he had to judge upon, I don't know, 500 submissions, and that they had to pass the second round, and the system was like a website with 3 thumbnails that you would see and a very short description of the project. And he had to judge upon that if it passes or not, you know, like, which is so much reducing of the work that these people have done. It's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, your project's only as good as the image you present.
But then again, it's I'm the advocate of the devil.
How to deal otherwise with this global scale, you know, that we are, or that these projects refer to.
Plus, we know it works like that, right? And we're complaining about it, and we're rightfully complaining about it. But the question is, can we change that it works like that instantly, or are we in a way also entangled in the system? And so, again, it's about maybe developing a hack or being, you know, compliant up to a certain extent, being able to deliver a good pitch, even though you probably think, man, come on, I hate this economy of, like, you know, giving elevator pitches, because it's really not adequately representing what I'm trying to say. But if you're good at it, you can, you know. And so I'm not totally in favor of this. I'm just saying that it's like dismissing it is much easier than trying to work maybe around it, work with it in a way that a hack would do.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I want to thank you for your project, because it's really interesting. Because the second part of the thing I just said, that you are, as an artist, this is part of your art to make it famous. I think you can also say it's part of your job to make you financially sustainable. It's like when you are a painter, you need to figure out what colors to use, and so you need to figure out what food to use and where to get it from.
Yes.
Somehow. And all the way through the history, you see really interesting hackers. Some people really hack into the mind of their donators, for example, or I don't know, or what Warhol did. You know, this was really interesting, economically hacking there at that time. So maybe you should also look in your interview series to get some people who have interesting fun. Probably you have this already. Interesting funding strategies. For example, I really all the time I met him. I enjoy how Public Elf lives. You know Elf?
I've heard of him. I know that he lives without money, right?
Yeah. He lives without money and without state for 6 years now. So He found a way to do this.
It's a hack. That's a hack.
That guy is really a hacker, you know. He really knows. He really gets by, you know.
Yeah.
There's a lot of interesting strategies he uses there.
Yeah. It's like completely opposite from from the example of Warhol, but it is in the same category of hacking economy and the way you live somehow.
Definitely.
So in a way there is a connection, in a very weird way there is a connection between these two things. I would think about it.
For example, when Elf rides in Berlin, the subway, he has a sign on his forehead saying "no ticket." So the guy comes, he already said no ticket, and I guess the legal problem in Germany is called Abschleichung von Leistung, so that you get you take something without saying that you take it for free or so, you know. It's just like lying, but.
Yeah.
He has a sign, no ticket. He's not lying. He's not. And so he's very friendly then, of course. And then the people find out that he doesn't have a passport, that he doesn't have a state. And for them it would be really stressful to make all the process with this friendly guy who says no ticket, you know. Why should they?
So she never had a problem.
So they always say, okay.
Amazing.
Go. There's strategies like that are interesting.
Has he ever been into legal troubles for not having an ID? Or?
I don't know, maybe. But maybe this
How is he traveling around?
I don't know, but he's traveling constantly, all the time.
Talk
to him, invite him, I guess he's happy to explain you.
Okay, we will invite him, that's a good idea.
Why doesn't? There are more people that live without money, I think. It's like this other guy in Germany, Raphael Fellmer, also lives without money. He does this food sharing initiative. And maybe when we are now at you really have to good to play or maybe hack the current system. Some of the artists you describe which you don't like how they use the art market, maybe if you try to see them as hackers, maybe it's their strategy to be that assholes. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know. For sure, it would be interesting to talk with people like those as well. Cool. Okay, maybe we should end it here because it's already too long for somebody else to listen to us. Thank you both so much. I think this was incredibly inspiring. I hope you feel the same way that I feel right now. I have this feeling of like...
It's good.
Thanks a lot.
Many links happening. Yeah.